and the neck of 90,000 law-abiding shooters. We've just had a discussion paper come out this week explaining their ideas on how they're going to punish us under the guise of gun control and targeting gun crime. Now, there's lots to talk about, but the one thing that made me scream when I saw the discussion paper was they are considering judging someone, whether or not they can have a license, judged on their views, opinions, or attitudes.
Right. So this is an excerpt that you've supplied to me from this discussion paper. Now, as we record this literally came out less than an hour ago. This will go to air in less than 24 hours. So this news is less than 24 hours old as you sit here watching it, if you're watching this as it goes live. This is quite an incredible and Orwellian moment. This, if you have a read of it, and I'll get you to talk us through it, please, Kate, this is a social credit system at work.
There are already fit and proper person requirements around Australia in regards to who can have a firearm or not. And no one's arguing that people shouldn't at least be checked in terms of some considerations before giving them access to a firearm. But this is going above and beyond the current fit and proper person's requirements. The person's views, opinions, and attitudes, the person's way of living will now be considered when applying for a firearm. I don't know about you, Topher, but I've posted some pretty spicy things on my social media over the years. In fact, I ran a Senate campaign saying give gun owners a fair go and went after Police Minister Papalia, who is part of the author of this document. I'm really looking down the barrel of having my guns confiscated off of me because of my opinion.
Well, there's some really interesting things that just catch my eye as well. And like I said, this is very much breaking news for us as we record this here. The person's physical and mental health, discriminating and choosing whether or not someone can have a firearms license based on their physical health would appear to me to be a breach of multiple different anti-discrimination acts that we have nationwide, and I'm sure in West Australia as well. Discriminating on the basis of views, this would have to be done with a great deal of transparency. Otherwise, there is a very real risk that this is going to simply be used to politically pick and choose based on what? There's no real criteria here, are there?
Well, the person's physical aspect of shooting is an all-ability sport. I was out in the range yesterday, and there are people in wheelchairs. That's part of the joy of being a shooter, is anyone can do it, any physical appearance. Women outshoot men regularly at the range. So you're right, it is discriminatory in its nature, and it's quite scary that the government will be able to say that a person cannot own a firearm in Western Australia anymore because their views differ from that of the state.
Now, for those that are watching internationally, you may not be familiar with the situation here in Australia. In Australia, after 1996, all semi-automatics were taken out of the hands of anyone that didn't qualify for a very difficult to get special license. You have to be a professional shooter using your firearms all the time to earn an income in order to get a semi-automatic. Everyone else is bolt action, maybe pump action, maybe a straight pull, something like that. We also have limitations on the size of magazines. Every weapon is registered. Every single owner is licensed. We already have one of the most highly regulated firearms regimes in the world. And for those that missed our report where we brought you on just a couple of weeks ago, Kate, just a few weeks ago we saw a number of firearm calibers, the actual bullet caliber, being taken off the market in WA.
Yeah, and that was under the guise of people can't be trusted with them because they might snipe at police. Now, there's never been any incident of that in Australia, and it actually disarmed veterans who like long-range shooting because that's what they're good at. So Western Australia is a very scary time for the future of shooting and hunting in our nation. And WA, I think there's bad times to come.
Well, West Australia is around about 1/3 the size of the entire continental United States. If you want to put that in international perspective, that's a single state in Australia. I always find it cute when Texans tell me that things are bigger in Texas. I just go, yeah, come out to West Australia. We've got 2 cattle stations that are the size of Texas, just if you put those 2 cattle stations together. But it's an enormous geographical area. There is an enormous amount of legitimate hunting, pest control, pig shooting. There's issues with camels and all sorts of different wild or feral introduced species that need to be kept under control. What are the practical realities that this is going to start to impose? Putting aside the sports shooters, that's important to me, of course, but putting that aside for a moment, just from a land management perspective in such a large physical area.
Well, the reality is an Australian who lives just across the border in South Australia or Northern Territory will have access to firearms that someone in Western Australia has been labelled as not trustworthy with. So someone who's culling camels up in the NT using calibers that someone across the border won't be allowed to own. It's creating very divisive divide between Australians, and it's government overreach at its peak.
Well, especially on the back of the laws that we already have in place. Is there any justification being given for the need for these laws? Have there been shootings in West Australia? Is there a long history of licensed firearm owners going postal and hurting people?
Not at all. In fact, most of the crimes committed with firearms in Australia are committed by unlicensed firearm owners with unregistered firearms. So it's targeting a problem that just simply doesn't exist. And it's a collectivist approach to punishing innocent people who just happen to like shooting or want to go out and protect our great Australian outdoors from pest animals.
Well, this is breaking news. This is a discussion paper that has been released by the West Australian Government. Kate Fantinel, thank you so much for bringing us this story. I will be crossing back to you as soon as the team gets back from the UK. We'll get another update from you on how this is progressing, whether the laws are going to be as draconian as what this discussion paper appears to be. Until then, Kate Fantinel, thank you so much for joining us once again on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you, Topher.